That is the amount of time given to the coverage of the hundreds of thousands strong March for Life, marking the 40th anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision by CBS and ABC's evening news shows Friday. Stories that did make the cut: Hillary Clinton's glasses and the Subway foot-long sub that's only 11 inches long. However, both networks did cover the other march in D.C., the pro-gun control event Saturday, which CBS said numbered close to 1,000 people. That prompted one religious organization to tweet, quote, "The march for gun control was paltry compared to the March for Life, but the media coverage was big versus small. The bias is palpable." The New York Times did mention the March for Life this year, unlike last year. The story, however, was below the fold on page A9. Above it, an article tying the March for Life to increased calls for gun control.
It's a positive first step, but the true test of our congressional leadership will be to pass a comprehensive bill. As a senator from Nevada, who's for years witnessed firsthand the difficulties our broken immigration system presents for immigrants and their families, it's very important to me, personally, that we finally resolve this issue. So I pledge that I'll do everything in my power as the majority leader to get a bill across the finish line.
We have an obligation and the need to address the reality of the situation that we face and address it in a way that is fair to the people that are doing it the right way. In essence, the hundreds of people that come to our offices every year whose relatives from all around Latin America and the world are waiting in line to legally come here. We have to be fair to them.
Well, look, I think a large consensus of Americans have had the view, which I've advocated for about 7 years, that if you do legalization after you get enforcement of the border, Americans would accept that. And that's what the bill here, or the proposal here, appears to do. It says once you get enforcement, then you have to go through a path to get a green card and citizenship. But that is highly misleading, because under this proposal, the day the bill is signed, you get instant legalization for 11 million illegal immigrants. It's called provisional, but that's nonsense. No one is ever going to revoke this legalization. If there's trouble with enforcement of the border, you are not going to get the government revoking legalization after people have come out of the shadows, given information to the government, including where their domicile is, and say, oh, we're going to revoke your status, you lose your job, you have to leave here. So what we're getting is instant legalization, which is the equivalent, the functional equivalent of a green card. Yes, you have to wait to get the actual green card, but that's why you've got this in the reverse order, and then the incentive for get the real enforcement is gone. And this is what happened with Reagan, who believed in this enforcement and legalization. He signed the amnesty in the late 1980s, and it turned out amnesty was achieved. There was no enforcement. We now have 11 million new illegal immigrants. And Reagan said it was one of the biggest mistakes of his presidency. Well, in principle, you could work out small chunks of this enforcement, and then after a year or two, when you do that, you get people who realize that the river has become a trickle of illegal immigrants, then you could propose instant amnesty right away. I mean, there are ways of approaching this, but the Democrats are in control, and the Democrats have never shown great interest in enforcement, as we saw when Reagan signed his amnesty. And the only question I have is, if we do this, which I think ultimately is humane legalization, and America is a generous country, will we have another cohort of 10 million illegals in another 10 and 15 years? If we do, then this will be an abject failure, and the way it's structured, it looks as if we will.
This is not an interview I ever expected to be doing. But I understand, Mr. President, this was your idea. Why did you want to do this together, a joint interview?
Well, the main thing is I just wanted to have a chance to publicly say thank you, because I think Hillary will go down as one of the finest Secretary of States we've had.
I love to hear the president whine about Fox News and talk radio. I think we ought to be proud of the fact that we annoy him so much. Obviously, if you look at the lineup on one side, the liberal media you start with, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, PBS, MSNBC, the elite newspapers, the one remaining news magazine, the universities, Hollywood, it doesn't stop anywhere. And on the other side, talk radio, Fox News. And they can't stand the fact that they no longer have a monopoly. So I think it ought to be taken as a compliment. And what I've always said about Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch, their genius was understanding and locating a niche audience in broadcast cable news, which is half the American people. The half that have suffered for decades by the fact that you get the news presented from a single perspective over and over again. And finally, the fact that there is a new perspective, talk radio and Fox, and they can't stand it. A source of pride, I would say.
Does this hurt 60 Minutes?
Probably not, because it'll be sloughed off as just another softie. But I think if you were El Aram, the semi-official paper in Egypt, and you had an interview like this with the president, you'd be embarrassed.
This has been a Sunfish production.